I want to thank the music team, our special music guest, and Gloria for reading. Today we continue our December series, which is on celebrating life. And today's topic is a life of courage, I can. Last week we talked a lot about faith and knowing that God and I together can do anything. And especially that who we are and what we think matters. So today, we're going to spend some time looking at that courageous heart, doing the inner work that demands that we possibly move into a place that's uncomfortable in our lives so we can establish deeper roots of harmony and miracles that happen in our lives. So here's the question for the week. What is the one choice that you can make today to know the possibilities of your experience are limitless as the Spirit flows through you and inspires you? So you courageously move into the universe and into the miracle of all that is possible for you. One more time. What's the one choice you can make today to know the possibilities of your experience are limitless as the Spirit flows through you, inspiring you, so you courageously move into the miracle of all that is possible for you. And to do that, we need to build our spiritual muscles. Last week I said that if we have faith, we know that all of life is cooperating with us to support us in living our own destiny. And it is. The problem is that when we start to embrace change, when we actually step fully into remembering that who we are and what we think matters, it sometimes looks like our life begins to fall apart. And we want to retreat to what is safe and comfortable. Just like it takes time to build muscles in our bodies, we have to build our spiritual muscles and allow time for that to happen. When I started ministerial school and had to make choices about how I spent my time, I realized that I was giving up a lot of things that I loved to do. I held on to the things that were important to me, like voice lessons and choir, but I let go of other things that were less important. I quit having people to dinner because it was a big time drain. And I spent less time watching TV and going to movies or taking vacations because most of my vacation money was spent going to San Diego for classes. And what I realized is for some people in my life, this was a problem. They made it clear to me that I wasn't being a good friend or that my choices were really out to lunch because I was in my 60s at the time. Why would I want to start a new career? I had to balance work with classes, papers to write, and exams, and that meant I spent less time with friends. A choice, by the way, which was a fabulous payoff. I admit that I began to think that I was being selfish or inconsiderate until I realized it was an opportunity for me to strengthen my me muscle and put what I knew was a life dream in the forefront of my life. I had to say no, and that was a big one for me, saying no to my friends, to do things together. I had to accept that not everyone was going to like the new me. But what I really learned was who my real supporters were. And the journey wasn't an easy one. Ernest Holmes in Creative Mind and Success wrote this: "The individual who has the most power is the one who has the greatest realization of the divine presence, and to whom this means the most as an active principle of his life. We all need some backbone and wishbone. There's something which wants only our recognition to spring into being, bringing with it all the power in the universe." My ministry wanted to spring into being and bring with it the power that meant for me. But what do you think Holmes meant when he talked about that active principle of life? I think he was talking about embracing our inner beingness. And since we're talking about building our spiritual muscles, let's remember that it's important to have some perspective on our own spiritual journey. Sometimes it takes time to build those muscles. And if we're willing to have courageous hearts, then we can have a life that we might describe as extremely satisfying and perhaps even as miraculous. And it requires us to be aware of the new me, to be who I'm becoming on this journey and where I'm being led. Like the opening song said, I have to know that God is in me. Know that God is in me. It's amazing when we accept that God is in me, the wisdom that comes to us, if we're willing to take risk and to change our habits. You know, when Thomas Edison was working on a lot of his inventions, when he came to a problem and he didn't know the solution to it, and it might have seemed impossible to him, he would just go take a 15 or 20-minute nap or rest for a little while, and he would relax and let go of the problem. This was his way of communing with that source of all knowledge. Sometimes he would fall asleep, but the interesting thing is when he woke up or quit relaxing, very often the solution was right before him like a vision. I actually adopted this when I was a programmer. When I had something that was seemingly a difficult thing to correct, I would just think about it before I go to bed at night, and very, very often the solution would come to me in the morning when I was awake. It's quite amazing what God and I could do together. So let's start now and make some small changes. If there's an area of your life in which you would like to make change and have more courage, perhaps you could just do that. Here's some small changes that can help you build that courage. Learn to really accept compliments rather than dismissing them. That was a hard one for me. Change your language around money or your job when you talk to others if you feel like you don't have enough money or you're not happy in your job. Instead of saying, I don't love my job, maybe say, my job is allowing me to have a nice place to live and to do things with my friends. Look at the difference in those two statements. Here's a small habit that can change a lot of things in your life, and I'd like to challenge each of you to try it this week. Try getting the word but out of your vocabulary. You know, when you say but, it negates everything that you had just said or thought. So what if instead of saying but, you said and? It's a small change, and it can change a lot of things. How would it feel if instead of saying you don't have enough money to do something, that you said, I'm choosing not to do that today, and very soon I plan to be doing it? I spent some time the last couple weeks watching some of my friends whom I consider very enlightened, and I heard a lot of language around I can't or I couldn't. What if instead they had said, I choose not to, or I choose to do something else instead? We're blessed in America with the freedom of choice, and it is all about choices. And the words I choose are far more empowering. I choose. It tells us that we're making the choice. In reality, the truth is that sometimes we don't have enough money to do one thing because we've chosen to use it in a different way. And that way that we're using it might be to have a new roof over our heads or have a car because ours was falling apart. We made choices about how to use the money that we did have. We have a choice to have a great realization of the divine presence and to make that presence an active principle of our lives. Ernest Holmes said this: "Not only must we have complete faith in spirit and its ability to know and do, but we must have complete confidence in our approach to it. We must not be lukewarm in our conviction. We must know that we know." That last line is really powerful. We must know that we know. When we're not courageous, we fiddle around and we fudge a little bit. We must not be lukewarm in our convictions of those things that we choose to have in our lives. If I had been lukewarm about ministry, I wouldn't have made it through the program. But I knew that it was where I was meant to be. In the Bible, in Philippians 4, we read these words of wisdom. I will say it again. Rejoice, let your gentleness be evident to all. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your request. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your mind. It goes on to say, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put it into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. Wow, those are amazing words from a master teacher. I know that I can always use a bit more of the peace of God in my life. How about you? We're beginning the month of celebrating the life of the birth of Christ. So let us be courageous enough to stand in truth, to do what is right and pure and admirable, and to learn from the master teacher Jesus, to put these things into daily practice. Reverend Alice Bandy was one of my favorite ministerial students, and she invited her students one day to move into the miracle of all that is possible for each of us, to move into the miracle of all that is possible. Notice that she said, the miracle of all that is possible for you. Isn't this just what our song before this talk was all about? Remembering who we are, that we are pure spirit. Reverend Alice used to ask us this question: what would you attempt if you knew you could not fail? What would you dream if you knew that all your dreams would come true? I suspect we all have some part of our lives in which we'd like to be courageous enough to bring about miracles in our life. I'm here to tell you, believe it, you can bring about miracles in your life. It's the time of Advent right now, which is a new coming. So let us be the time of coming of the new you. Let it be a time of allowing the great power of the divine to wash through you and empower you to live a courageous and miraculous and wonderful life. What I know is that I can do whatever it takes to walk each day in the divine light and be exactly who I came here to be courageous enough to embrace everything that comes my way. When I learn to rely on those who love me and whom I trust to help me remember the truth that I am an expression of the divine with a huge toolkit for living life. I'd like to tell you about a young boy who was quite courageous and full of faith. A lady was finishing her Christmas shopping, and she got into the line to check out, and she noticed this little boy in front of her, and the cashier was handing him back some money and saying, "You don't have enough money for this doll." Well, he just looked at her, and he looked very despondent, and his grandmother said to him, "I told you you didn't have enough money." And she said, "Wait here a minute, I'll be right back." Apparently she went to go find a doll that was slightly cheaper. So the lady asked the little boy who the doll was for, and he says, "Well, it's for my little sister. She really wanted Santa to bring it to her. But a couple days ago, she went to heaven, and so Santa can't bring it now. So my dad told me that my mom's going to be going to join her really quick. So I thought that if I got the doll for her, Mama could bring it to her, and then she would have it." And so the lady's heart is just opening up and thinking about this young little boy who was only about 6 or 7. And she said, "Well, let me see your money again." And she took his money and slipped some more of her money in and gave it to the cashier. And the cashier said, "Yeah, you do have enough money." And she gave him back some change. And the little boy got this big grin on his face. He said, "Look at this. I have not only enough money for the doll, but now I can buy Mama the white rose because she loves white roses." And then he told the lady, "Last night when I was praying, I asked God to make sure that I had enough money today for this doll because I really want my little sister to have it." And the lady remembered an article in the newspaper that had said that this young family had been in a wreck and the little girl had died immediately and the mother was in critical care. And a couple days later, she noticed the obituary in the paper and she went to the funeral parlor, and when she got there, she had brought a dozen white roses, and there were actually quite a few people there. And she walked up to the casket, and on one side the lady had the doll, and on the other side she had the beautiful white rose. What we can learn from this little boy is that life can be full of miracles. He was courageous enough to ask for what he wanted. He wanted enough money to buy his sister the doll and his mama white rose. And God provided an answer to that prayer through an earth angel. In building our spiritual muscles, it becomes our spiritual job to remember that in our lives, there is only one path. The path of our spiritual blossoming, of faith, of courage, and it's a blessed adventure. All of it. Ernest Holmes said this: "We should never lose sight of the fact that the soul is on the pathway of an endless and ever-expanding experience, that only by expansion can it evolve." We cannot really get lost. We just make detours sometimes along that journey of evolving. Psychologists say that all that we see happening in our life is actually a projection of our own past experiences and our own past issues and beliefs. Have you ever heard the phrase, "You spot it, you got it"? Basically, it calls us to recognize that when we can see something in someone else, when we're being critical or judging, it's because we're familiar with whatever that behavior is. And we see things through the lens of our own life. We knew the behavior and we recognized it because somewhere along the way, we had seen it before. If we look at people in our lives, we can see what is going on inside of us. If we see our friends as generous and kind, it's most likely because we're generous and kind, and we can see that behavior. If we see our friends as stingy or petty or judgmental, at least at some level, we're probably reflecting something within our own lives and within our own beings. Knowing this concept of projection, might allow us not to take things personally when someone's pointing a finger at us or criticizing what we're doing. It helps us to evolve to the realization that it's really their stuff and not necessarily ours. That's not to say that if several people are telling us that our behavior is limiting or critical in some way, that we shouldn't actually at least take a look at it. But the truth is that truth is only found on the inside. When we view life from the ego mind, we tend to see duality and we judge. And when we start judging, we suffer because we forget that really there is only one life, and it's God's life. And it's each of our lives right here and right now. So when we withhold the tendency to judge, we can just relax and see life from the soul's point of view, where all is well and all is for our good. And it's in that place that we know our own ability to do and be who we are. We know we can do whatever we put our minds to. Jean Houston reminds us that we all have the extraordinary coded within us, just waiting to be released. So what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? If you recognize that extraordinary that is coded within you, waiting to be released? What would you do if you could let go of all the past experience that created fear in you, or failure, or limitations about being not good enough, or smart enough, or not rich enough, whatever your little issue is? This week, have the courage to make your dream happen. And not only that, make your dream even bigger. What would you attempt or dream if you knew a magic genie could make it all come true? The truth is, you do have that magic right within you. Quit being limited by your past or your experience or your thoughts, and think bigger. Now, that's not always an easy thing to do. When I was in ministerial school, one retreat, our dean asked us to just get rid of the notion of what we thought our ministry was going to look like. Well, I was pretty stubborn, and I knew what my ministry was going to look like. I was creating a Center for Abundant Living in Oregon somewhere, and that was going to be my life. I was going to teach classes and teach people how to live abundantly. So when she asked us to do this, and asked us to give up our concept of what our life looked like, I was none too happy, and I was really very, very upset. How could I throw out what I knew my ministry was going to be? My fear came up, and actually tears came up. And I actually did the exercise, but I wasn't really too engaged in it, to tell you the truth. And that next February is when I came to Louisiana and had a totally different vision of what my ministry was going to be like. If we are courageous enough to think bigger and to dream bigger, to not be afraid that we might fail, imagine what might be possible. You know, Ralph Waldo Emerson, in his self-reliance essay, wrote this: "We but half express ourselves and are ashamed of that divine idea which each of us represents. God will not have his work made manifest by cowards. It needs a divine man to exhibit anything divine." So be divine. Step into the fullness of your divinity and watch your biggest dreams manifest. In many of my prayers, I say, the God without is the God within each of us. It's important to trust in the gifts of today. We exist in limitless opportunities, which are forever seeking expression through us. There's a beautiful quote, and I unfortunately do not know the author and could not find it. Having spent the better part of my life trying either to relive the past or experience the future before it arrives, I have come to believe that in between these two extremes is peace. In between the two extremes of reliving the past and looking to the future before it even shows up is peace. There are ways to stay the course. The tools we use in this spiritual adventure called life are our spiritual practices, whether yours be meditation or spiritual mind treatment or visioning or whatever. Choose one and dive deeply into it. Commit to doing it so that you can trust and make your dreams even bigger, so that you can be that divine being, that divine man that exhibits divinity, so that you aren't a coward in some area of your life that you know is something that you've come here to do. Be like the little boy buying a doll for his sister. Believe that you can have what it is you want. Next week, we're going to talk about a life of love, and it's going to be a Christmas story and all about our Christmas celebration. But as we wrap up, I want you to remember that all of life is cooperating with us to support us in living out our own destiny. When we embrace change, we must have the courage to follow through and let go of the outer experience that might be telling us to give up and return to the familiar. We need to build the spiritual me muscle, learn to change our habits, and take risk. Don't forget to practice using and rather than but. Remember that life is about choices. So frame your decisions as choices, not limitations. Choose to have a great realization of the divine presence and make that presence an active principle of your life. Revise your dreams, make them bigger. Truth is only found on the inside. Know you have the magic of a genie to make all your wishes come true. And your challenge this week is to do one thing each day that you're a little bit afraid of doing, so that you can build that courageous muscle. What's the one choice that you can make today to know the possibilities of your experience are limitless as the Spirit flows through you, inspiring you, so you courageously move into the miracle of all that is possible. Join us next week for our Christmas celebration, A Life of Love, We Can. Let's pray. So just taking a deep, nourishing breath. Knowing that right where we are, we're experiencing that Christ life that is specifically with us during this time of the Christmas season. Just feel that divinity. Allow yourself to be inspired and feel that inspiration flowing through all of the cells of your body. Because all that God is, the peace and the love and the freedom and the choices, all that God is who each of us are. What I know to be the truth of this week, we'll be asking our questions. What would you attempt if you knew you could not fail? How can we move into a life that's even more miraculous than the one we're currently living? What I know for true is that it takes courage to really live your own dreams, to let go of all of the comments from other people, to let go of any criticism, any judgment, and just to live who you know you've come here to be. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful that this week we're letting go of the buts and we're using that word and living an even bigger dream. I'm grateful that the God without is the God within each of us that inspires us to courageously move into the miracle of all that's possible. And it's from all that gratitude that I just release these words into the law of mind, spirit, and action, knowing the truth that wherever we are, God is, and that God has already called all of this good. So I can just say amen, and we can affirm it together. And so it is.